Hi, this is Patricia Stepler with Your Inside Power, where we are helping you to discover the powers you have inside of you to change your life and build your own reality. And today I have a very special guest with us, Linda Sunshine West. Linda, I'm so glad to have you with us today.
I'm excited to be here, Patricia. Let's get going.
Yes. Well, let me tell our group what you do. So Linda is the CEO and founder of Action Takers Publishing. I love that title. And she's award-winning, international best-selling, #1 best-selling author. She's a speaker. She's a film producer of Wish Man movie and a red carpet interviewer. That sounds like an interesting thing too. So with Action Takers Publishing, mission is to empower 5 million women and men from all over the world to share their stories while inspiring and motivating people to take action to live the life they truly want to live. That's what we're all about here at Your Inside Power. So if you're ready to share your story, Linda's the one to go to because she can help you make that happen. Now in the show notes, there's a masterclass that you can go to, and maybe she'll tell us a little bit more about that. But there's some other interesting things about Linda. Linda ran away from home at the age of 5, just 5 years old, and she was away for an entire week. And she's going to share that with us today. And she faced a fear every single day for an entire year. So Linda, thank you for coming today and sharing with our audience.
Thanks for having me, Patricia.
Yes. So let's go to that 5-year-old thing.
Okay.
You ran away from home. And were you scared when you ran away from home? At age 5, that seems like such a young, I can't imagine if one of my children had run away from home at the age of 5, how worried as a mom I would have been and how afraid I would have been for them. So tell us about that experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. That does kind of seem to be the thing that people, kind of tap into first, because, at 5 years old, I've seen little 5-year-olds nowadays, and I can't imagine myself being that age and running away. I ran away because I was in a very volatile, abusive, alcoholic household. And I just took a stand and I was like, I'm not going to live here. That was my decision. And I ran away just to the neighbor's house. So I was safe. I was in a safe environment. My mom knew where I was, but I didn't know she knew where I was. And this is where things kind of started to shift for me, is that I was ingrained with a belief system. And that belief system was that the reason they didn't come to get me is because they don't want me around and they don't love me. And that was my true belief. Really, what was happening is my mom did know where I was. She knew I was safe. And I believe, and I can't ask her because she's passed away, but I believe that she was allowing me to exercise my independence as a 5-year-old, because that's how my mom kind of was. And when I came home, though, after being gone a week, I came home and became riddled with fears, from my dad. And I became a people pleaser, like so many people I'm meeting out there nowadays. There are a lot of people who are people pleasers. And that's what happened to me. And I let that fear and that people pleasing control my life from that point forward for many, many decades.
So I'm thinking about you as a 5-year-old, and you must have been very aware of what was happening in your house, or it was just very, very traumatic that you would have left. And obviously that neighbor was a place you felt safe to go to. So when you're thinking about that, were you very aware of what was happening?
That's a great question, because at the time, I might not have really recognized that it was awareness. I was just 5. But I do remember one incident where my mom and dad were out in the living room, and, dad was the abuser and my mom was an enabler, and she took his abuse, unfortunately. And my little sister and I, so I'm 5 and she's 4, and we're huddled in the bedroom on the bed, just like against the corner, and I'm protecting her. Like I'm this 5-year-old that's protecting my little baby sister. And so right there, that there was some sort of awareness that something might happen to us if he came in. Now, he never did, fortunately, but I was her protector. And so I believe there was a sort of awareness of like, this isn't a good thing, living in this kind of environment. This is not good. And why else would I run away? So I truly do believe that I I was aware of what was going on. I was aware that it wasn't the right thing. It wasn't a good way to live. And I wasn't going to live there.
So you said you had your sister. Were you worried about her that week that you were gone?
Oh,
Do you remember?
probably
Maybe you don't
not.
even remember that.
Yeah, I don't remember that. And probably not, because I was more worried about my life, what I was
Mhm.
going to do and my own, what was going to happen to me, you know. But yeah, great question. That's one for me to
Yeah.
ponder.
So what happened after that week?
Well, after that week, I came home and my mom brought me home. So what happened was my mom called the neighbor and she said, Linda's been gone long enough. You can send her home now. So I came home, and that was when I came home literally with my tail between my legs and my head bent down. I
Mhm.
didn't look people in the eyes for decades to come because I had this fear about, their eyes locking with mine. And I just felt so uncomfortable and so nervous about that I literally did not. I would I would look down when I would walk. I would look down at the ground. I used to count steps. I became like OCD about some certain different types of things. And that was one of the things. I would count my steps: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. But I would stare down as I was walking, wouldn't look people in the eyes. And it was decades that I did that until I was 51. And something snapped inside of me at age 51. And I was driving to work one day. I was working for a judge in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And this was my 49th job after 36 years in the corporate world. And I was driving to work and I was like, my life is worthless. I have no value. I have no purpose. There's no reason for me to be here. I don't understand it. Like, why am I here? There's nothing for me that's important. And I started talking that way to myself. And then I was like, as a matter of fact, why is this planet here? This is all stupid. It doesn't make any sense. So I was going through these thoughts in my mind. And when I got to work that day, there was a Facebook post and it said, I'm a life coach. I took some time off. I'm getting back into it. And I'm looking for 5 women who want to change their lives. I didn't know her. I didn't know anything about her. I didn't know what a life coach was, but I knew one thing. I wanted to figure out why I'm here,
Mhm.
and started that journey. And that is when my whole life started. I was 51 years old is when my life really started, because I started coming into awareness. Yeah.
So that whole episode back when you were 5 affected decades of your life. So do you think that's why you had so many different jobs? Because you were always searching for something, searching for the answer, and maybe you weren't even aware you were searching.
Yeah, it's funny because when I first started thinking about it, I started thinking, gosh, that pattern of 5 years old of running away was a pattern that was starting of running away, running away. So I ran away from 49 jobs, right? But really, as I started looking at it closely, the reality was that I was never running away. I was always running to something better. Either I felt underappreciated, or I felt like, my value was not seen. There were so many different things that happened on different jobs. And I would like, you know what? I'm not doing this. Just like when I was 5, I'm not doing this. I'm not living this life. I'm going to go to another, I'm going to find something. There's got to be something better out there. So constantly looking for something better is kind of that pattern that I've had my whole life. But what's interesting about it is I've wrapped it around more to fear, the fear of staying. So is the fear of staying stronger than the fear of leaving? Because oftentimes we won't leave situations. My mom was with my dad in that abusive environment for 55 years. So bad of an environment that the first words my mom said when my dad took his last breath, I was standing right next to her. She said, thank God the bastard is dead.
Wow.
Like, to think about that, a lot of people go through that because the fear of leaving is so strong. The fear of leaving is so strong. And so when I married somebody just like my dad, my first marriage, somebody just like my dad,
Mhm.
I had fear of leaving too. But my fear of staying was stronger than my fear of leaving. So it's like there were two fearful situations, and which one was I going to do? Stay or leave? And so I decided to leave, and I'm so glad I did. My daughter was 4 weeks old, and my son was 14 months old. And I didn't know where I was going, what I was going to do, but I knew what I was no longer going to do. And I was not going to repeat my mom's life. Was a
Right,
decision that I made at
right.
that time. Yeah. So it's interesting, like how we see it is like, was I running away or was I running to something better? I choose to think I was running to something better every time.
Yeah, I think you probably were, especially if you were leaving another abusive situation.
Yeah.
You were protecting your children because
Yeah.
you probably felt so unprotected as a child.
Yeah, I did. And I felt unloved and I felt like I didn't belong. They used to make fun of me, all my siblings. I'm the number 4 or 5, and siblings would make fun of me and, say, you don't look the same as us. And you must be the milkman's daughter back in the days when we actually had a milkman that would
Yeah.
deliver the milk to the front porch, right?
Some people wouldn't know about that.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's interesting though, because we put the story to it. Whatever
Right.
story we want to tell ourselves is the story we apply. And so I'm choosing now to change the story, to change the
Yeah.
narrative, and to feel more empowered with my life instead of a victim, like I had been a victim for so many years.
Right. And that's funny you say that, because I was just talking to a lady the other day, and we were talking about the stories we tell ourselves. And we often will look back in our past and we create this story that wasn't even true. It was our
Yeah.
perception, but perception's reality. So to us at that time, that was the true story. And then sometimes when we look back, we can say, well, was that really true? And we can question. And sometimes that's a good thing to question. Was that the true story? Or was that just my interpretation? And then, like you say, change it, because we can also do that. We can change our past by changing those stories that we've told ourselves. And
Yeah,
especially when it's a
definitely.
painful situation, like you went through, that's really difficult.
Yeah. And one thing I love to share is that so my dad, I always saw him as a monster. He had this furrowed brow, and he was a deep, deep thinker. He was a brilliant man, but he just didn't know how to handle his anger, right?
Mhm.
And so about 4 years ago, I was at I live near the beach, and we were on the pier, and I was walking down the pier, and as I was walking down the pier, I remembered my childhood. We used to go to that pier a lot. My dad liked to go fishing. He would take us fishing, and I hated it. Oh my God, I absolutely hated it. But I really don't know if I hated it or I just hated being with him.
Mhm.
And so as I was walking down the pier, a couple of years ago, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to change my stories. I just made a decision. I'm going to change my stories. And the story was every time we went to the beach or every time we went fishing, I hated it. It was miserable. And then I'm going to turn that around, and I'm going to say, you know what? I'm grateful for that moment that I had with the family, that we got to have this time together. And then so I went through this like forgiveness and gratitude journey. And I'm going to forgive my dad. I'm going to forgive my dad for those moments that I was miserable. And then I'm going to have gratitude for him for bringing the family together. And it was interesting because I did that 100 days in a row. It was the last 100 days of the year in 2017. And by the end of the year, or maybe even by the end of, halfway through that 100 days, I started to see my dad as a human being that was a flawed human being. And he just didn't know how to handle his anger. I stopped seeing him as the monster that I had seen him as for decades. And I've changed my whole narrative of who my dad was, and we can do that. That's what's so powerful as human beings. We can rewrite the story, and
Mhm.
we can create an empowerment behind it instead of a disempowerment behind it. And that's what I chose to do with him. And I'm so glad I did. So glad I did.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you start working with a life coach, because I'm sure there are people that will be listening to this episode, and they'll wonder, would that help them? Because sometimes we're afraid to go to a person, or, I know for years I probably would have benefited a great deal from having a coach, but it took me decades to realize that I needed to work with a coach. So what did that coach do for you that it would kind of changed your life and gave you a different perception of, what your world was like?
Oh gosh, she helped me to, I mean, so many different things, but really like, I think the crux of it is that she helped me to be honest with myself. So she would ask me lots of questions. I remember I hated her every week because she asked tough questions, but then I got the opportunity to be honest with myself or not, right? So she would ask a question and I got the opportunities to do with that question what I wanted. And I decided that I'm going to make the most of this time with her. I worked with her for 5 months. So the questions that she would ask me is I would just really dive deep and do that deep soul searching to come up with the honest answers, because I realized that if I came up with fake answers, that it wasn't going to serve me.
Mhm.
It wasn't going to help me grow. So really it was that opportunity she taught me to really dig deep and to find the truth, whether I liked it or not, because oftentimes I didn't like the truth about myself. So it really taught me to do that. And then what it did is it helped me to have forgiveness for myself.
Okay.
That was huge. That was huge.
Yeah. So when you were working with her, you said you didn't like your coach, but your coach isn't there to be your friend, right? Your
Right.
coach is there to help you, and whether it's a coach or a mentor or, whoever you're working with, they're not there to help you. They're not there to be your friend. They are there to help you to make the shifts that you need to get the result that you're searching for.
Yeah. And
So,
it's almost like I felt like the more angry I got with her, the better results I got. Right. So it
okay.
was, yeah, it was kind of interesting because again, I was angry. I wasn't angry with her really, but the truth, the reality was that I was angry with myself that I'd gotten to that place. I was angry with myself that I wasn't honest. I was angry with myself that I didn't know how to look at the world and see that I was blaming it for all of my misgivings. I wasn't able to see that at the time. And she helped me to tap into that. So the angrier I got, the better it was, the better results I got. So it's kind of interesting,
Right.
to see it from that perspective.
And she was probably pushing you,
Oh, big
to
time.
make the most of that time too. How can I push you to get these results quicker, because usually when we get to the point where we're actually willing to go to a coach or to a mentor, it's because we feel like we've hit rock bottom, and having, what'd you say, 48 different jobs,
49.
49 different jobs in a few decades is, quite,
A lot.
yeah, I can't imagine. So,
Yeah.
then, so what do you do with other people to get their stories? Because that's obviously something you're doing with your publishing. So are you getting other people to share their stories? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is one thing that I was never a storyteller. I was never a reader. I was never a writer, and all these things. And as I made my way through this journey working with my life coach, so I worked with her for 5 months, and that was in 2014. And then the end of 2014, I was by myself. And I wasn't experiencing the same growth rate that I had experienced with her. And I'd
Mhm.
gotten kind of addicted to positivity and positive change, and got addicted to growth, which is a great thing to get addicted to, because I
Right.
used to be addicted to other, we were talking earlier, I used to be addicted to gambling. So this is this is
Yeah,
a
this is
different
much
kind.
better.
Yeah, this is gambling on myself, right? So it's a
Right,
much
right.
better result. And so January 1st of 2015, I woke up that morning and I said, wait a minute, I've had so much transformation and I want to keep it going.
Mhm.
So I decided that morning, like, I've got so many fears. I'm going to break through a fear every day this year. And so that's how it came to me, breaking through a fear every single day, 365 days in a row. And I got to tell you, if you're willing to jump in and break through fears every day for a year, your life will transform, especially if you're open to it. And so, working with this life coach, she was that catalyst that helped me to move forward and to catapult to the next stage for me, and it was just astronomical. And I'm so glad I went on that journey to do that. And with that, I don't remember the question. I just wanted to get into that year of fears. Oh, the other
Yeah.
people telling their stories.
Yes.
So, okay. So during this journey, so it's 2015, I'm breaking through a fear every day. And on to about day 45. And I attended a seminar. It was what a vision board seminar.
Mhm.
And this gentleman got up and he spoke. His name is Greg Reed. And he was so amazing. I was just staring at him the whole time, like absorbing all this amazing information that he was sharing with us. And at the end of him speaking, he invited us all to attend his event that he hosts every year called Secret Knock. And it was $1,500. And I was like, oh, there's no way I can't afford that. There's no way. So my life coach happened to be at that event with me. And she looked at me in the face and she said, you have to go to that event. You have to be there. She knew there was a reason I needed to be there. I didn't know what the reason was, but I was like, okay, I trust her. And so I went ahead and paid and I attended that event. And that was the start of everything for me with what I'm doing today. So I ended up Greg ended up becoming my mentor. And he was working on a book while I was breaking through a fear every day. And the book was called Footsteps of the Fearless. He's like, you're breaking through a fear every day. You're a perfect person to be in this book. So I joined that book, and that was the start of it. I was one of the authors in a collaborative book. And then that was really awesome. And then the end of that year, I broke through those fears. He said to me, that's so cool that you broke through a fear every day this year, but what are you going to do about it? And I'm like, I think that's plenty. I don't need to do anymore. No. You need to write a book about it. So I did. I wrote a book called The Year of Fears. It's the lessons that I learned during that year. And that was kind of the start of it. And then after that, I said, I was in a book. I wrote a book. What's my next natural state of progression, which is I love to keep growing. I'm going to start putting together my own collaboration books. So I started doing that. And now I think we're on number 13. And, it's just been a year and a half really that we've been pushing forward with these books and just helping people to share their stories. Our stories can make a great impact on the planet if we tell them.
Yeah.
We just got to get them out there.
Everybody has a story inside them. They
Oh,
say
lots of
everybody has a
them.
book inside of them, but certainly
Yeah.
everybody has a story that something they've overcome, something that they've, challenged themselves to do. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's something that happened to you and you came out on the other side. There's always a story that people can share.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when Greg mentioned that to me, he said, you need to write a book. I was like, who wants to read my story? Like, I don't have anything of importance. And the thing is that when we lived it, it doesn't seem like there's any significance to it, but just the story, like the simple story, like simple, right? The simple story of me packing up my 4-week-old and my 14-month-old and putting my diaper bag over one shoulder, a purse over the other, a child on one hip and one in a baby carrying case, and walking out on that abusive relationship. There's a story there. There's a story there that can possibly inspire somebody else to grab the kahunas and walk out on that abusive relationship. If that's all that story serves, boy, what a powerful, impactful story it is.
Right.
Yeah.
So how have you utilized these books to maybe touch other people?
Oh my gosh. It's
I'm sure you have some stories there too.
Yeah, lots of stories. It's funny because I was never a storyteller until I started telling stories.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Oh my gosh, the stories that just flooded my mind right now. There's one in particular I want to share is Cynthia. So Cynthia came to us and she's like, I want to tell my story, but nobody wants to hear from me. I'm just a housewife. Her words, not mine, by the way. And she said, she has this son who has autism, but I want to tell my story, but nobody wants to hear it. But I'm going to do it anyway. So she shared her story. And in the process, what we end up doing is we interview you, like we interview our authors, and we connect you with other people who have platforms and invite you to be interviewed on these other platforms. And so she's like, I'm just going to sign up for everything. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never been interviewed. I'm just going to sign up. And next thing I know, about a week after we launched the book, which it did become a #1 international bestseller in 3 countries in under 2 hours, which was awesome. And, she messaged me like a week later and said, somebody reached out to me because they saw my interview on your show and they want to interview me. And then people started reaching out to her to be interviewed. Next thing I know, like a week later after that, she's like, I'm going to do a book signing at my local bookstore. So this woman who's like, I have nothing to share is now being interviewed. She's doing book signings, and she's out there sharing her story. So it has impacted not only her, but also the other people who are hearing her story. Our stories have impact. We just need to share them.
Yeah. And I think you're so right there. And I probably should be doing some of that myself. I've told my son was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes when he was almost 9. He was just about to turn 9.
Mm.
And I remember telling him at that time, I don't know why you got chosen to have juvenile diabetes, but there's a reason for it. And you just have to figure out what that reason is. And, I've often thought there's probably a lot of parents who get that news about their child that I could be helping. And there's certainly a lot of people, and he actually did help a couple kids when he was in high school that were diagnosed when they were in elementary school also. And he went and talked to them, because it's a tough disease. And, while you don't appear like there's anything wrong with you, there's a lot going on inside, so you're right. There are ways that something that happens to us that seems so insignificant or so minor that nobody wants to hear about could really be very helpful for other people to know.
Even just that one simple phrase of him figuring out why, that's an empowerment move, right? And I think that's really important. A lot of people, why me, why me? But you're like, okay, why me? Let me figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me do something with it.
Well,
Awesome.
and that probably happened because I had a child that I taught in school. And when he was diagnosed in 1st grade, his mother was just so distraught and just so upset and just beyond herself, and it was like, when this happened to my kid, I'm like, I'm not going to be that kind of a parent. And I don't want him to be raised like that, thinking that, this is somehow his fault. And, he has to deal with this, that's not the kind of, I wanted him to be raised with the idea of, everybody gets something, something happens to people. This is yours, and there's a reason. And, there's a way that you can touch other people with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we just have a couple minutes left, Linda. Could you share anything, how people can get a hold of you, what you might have to offer them, maybe one of the collaborative books or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. First, thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate it. It's been great being here. You can find us at actiontakerspublishing.com. We help people to share their story in collaborative books as well as in solo books. The collaborative books are what I like to focus on most because it's the community around the collaboration that I love building community and helping the authors to get to know each other. But if you're looking to write your story, we do have courses. We have, how to write your book, the fast, fun, and easy way, how to publish your book, the fast, fun, and easy way, and how to market and monetize your book, the fast, fun, and easy way. And it was interesting because when we first came up with our motto used to be Action Takers Publishing. We take action so you don't have to. That used to be the motto. But then as we started getting testimonials after testimonials, and all of our clients were saying, oh my God, that was so much fun and so easy, or that was fast. And so we incorporated those terms that they were using for us into our motto. So we make it fast, fun, and easy. Go to actiontakerspublishing.com.
Okay, so let's keep that in mind. If you have a story to tell and you want to get that out to the world, because everybody has a story, go to actiontakerspublishing.com and reach out to Linda. And, I want to really thank you for being a guest with us today. And maybe we can have you back sometime. You can share some of those stories, maybe bring some of the people that you have been in your books. That would be fun.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah. Oh, any opportunity that we can have to share their stories, that just lights me up like nothing else,
Yeah, that would be fun. We'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.